Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Kathy Nolan. I chair the Assembly's Education Committee, and together with Assemblywoman Deborah Glick, we manage these interviews. We have lots of our colleagues here today, including our two ranking members, Ed Rott and Chad Lupinacci, and a number of other members who will come in and out as their schedule permits. And you know, we're really grateful. We've had an amazing turnout of people interested in serving as a regent. You know, it's a non-compensated position, as I know all our candidates know, but I think it's a great testimony to how people want to volunteer on behalf of our children and all our families. And of course, the regent's portfolio is wide. It includes many aspects of adult ed too, but we've been struck by how many people really care about education in our state. And so we welcome you today, and we've had an opportunity to review your resume, and you know, everybody has come in with impressive credentials. So what we just ask you to do today, if you would like, is just a brief statement on, you know, perhaps a little bit about your resume, but also why you would want to serve as a regent, what might make you unique in terms of some particular skill set you have. And we have always had an amazing array of people. We had a pharmacist yesterday and a retired pharmacist. So there's a wide skill set that we look for in our regents, and you know, we're happy to hear what you have to say. So say your name, because with the live stream, even though we know who you are from the resume.
My name is Asher Mansdorf.
Thank you, Mr. Mansdorf. Thank you. All right.
Thank you to the members of the committee for inviting me to interview to become a member of the New York State Board of Regents. Beyond what appears in my resume, allow me to tell you about myself. I am a first-generation American. My parents survived the Holocaust and arrived at the docks of New York City in 1948. They were penniless. They spoke no English. They had limited formal educations, and neither graduated high school. But when they reached this great and welcoming state, they were determined to begin life anew. They succeeded, and now I have the great good fortune to appear before you to interview for a position on the New York State Board of Regents. I am a general dentist with a fellowship in general anesthesia. I received my bachelor's degree from Yeshiva University. My dental degree is from Columbia University School of Dental and Oral Surgery. I completed residencies at Jamaica Hospital and Montefiore Hospital. I am a board member of the Lawrence Union Free School District in Long Island. Currently, I serve as vice president, and in previous terms, I served as president of the board. I was elected to the Lawrence School Board 5 times. Twice running, unopposed. The Nassau Herald, our local newspaper, endorsed me each time. My personal academic and professional achievements are a credit to the vision and perseverance of the members of the New York State Assembly and Senate, who collaborated with the New York State Board of Regents more than 50 years ago to create a pathway to success for all New Yorkers. Those elected officials and their appointees made it possible for me to interview today, and for that I wish to say thank you to all of you who, by dedicating yourselves to public service, continue to create opportunities for success for all New Yorkers. The leaders of this great state deserve to be applauded for building an educational system that enabled my immigrant parents to raise a family that now includes dentists, doctors, nurses, attorneys, therapists, and educators, each and every one of whom was educated in New York State and owes his or her success to the opportunities and protections this body has put in place. Many years ago, I pledged that I would one day repay my debt to the citizens of New York by paying it forward. That personal commitment is part of what motivated me to try to make a difference. That is why in 2001, I became actively involved in my local school district. As a direct result of my life experiences and my service on the school board for the last 15 years, I believe I am uniquely qualified to serve on the New York State Board of Regents. I understand the importance and value of education, and that is the only way that one can be lifted from poverty to success. I understand the challenges of being the child of non-English speaking parents. I understand the challenges of a father leaving home at 6 in the morning to work all day in a low-paying restaurant job, and then come home 11 at night, walking over the Williamsburg Bridge to save the 5-cent bus fare. I understand that others face challenges that I can hardly imagine, but from which they can emerge as strong, capable individuals who deserve every opportunity for a truly superior education. I know how to do more with less, as demonstrated when the Lawrence School Board introduced its own tax cap in 2005. We accomplished this despite diminishing federal and state aid. In the future, I expect that federal and state aid will not be enough to meet the ever-increasing bills for payroll, facilities, safety, and security. Yet, I understand that we must cover these expenses without diminishing the robust educational curriculum and learning environment that allows the children of this generation to achieve and to excel. I have extensive firsthand experience with the additional unfulfilled needs of underprivileged children. 70% of our student body is eligible for either a free or a reduced fee lunch. I know how to assemble a team of visionaries to identify challenges, to develop strategies for success, and to stay the course. In my tenure as president and vice president of the school board, we completed major upgrades on buildings that were ignored for more than 50 years. We instituted new programs, reigniting a passion in our teachers to excel. We implemented programs to combat indifference in our parent body, and now see the positive change that can be brought about by an involved parent body. In 2009, long before Bill de Blasio became mayor of New York City, and certainly without his funding stream, the Lawrence School District introduced a full pre-K program with transportation. As a direct result of these initiatives, our high school graduation rate for students who enter our system in pre-K is a staggeringly wonderful 99%. We expanded our music and art programs. We have a music program that begins in first grade and a full instrumental choral program that starts in third grade. The Lawrence School District is only one of 3 districts on Long Island with a New York State-approved dance curriculum. We sent 250 students to Disney World in Orlando, and they performed for thousands of spectators. 10 special needs students from our life skills class accompanied this group. We were informed that they were the first special needs group to perform at Disney. What an incredible accomplishment. These students will cherish the memory for a lifetime. By the way, this was done without taxpayer funding. We raised the money from the greater school community. We have 44 clubs at our high school, 18 clubs at our middle school, and 6 clubs at each elementary school. This year, we became one of the first schools on Long Island to offer a course in 3D printing. Over the last 10 years, Lawrence has been identified as having the largest and fastest growing Hispanic community on Long Island. As a result, we have a fully implemented K-12 bilingual program. The Lawrence Public Schools mission statement identifies the district as the unifying force in the community. This is more than an aspirational statement. It is the living truth. In the aftermath of Superstorm Sandy, when local, county, and state agencies were overwhelmed and could not meet the most basic needs of our school families, we jumped in. We were the first to go into the most hard-hit and impoverished parts of the community. These are neighborhoods and families that need the most and too often receive the least. We found the families that were in distress and made sure they were assisted by every faith-based and community organization. This was a defining moment in Lawrence for uniting school and community. This was not a slogan on a letterhead. It was food, shelter, blankets, medical help, and power generators, literally everything. I agree with Governor Cuomo's belief that good government is when you spend people's money like it's your own. We spend it efficiently, and we don't waste it. As an elected member of the school board or as an appointed regent, I take very seriously the idea that it is a position of trust and I must execute each responsibility with the knowledge that the time I invest, the words I use, the money I recommend spending are not my time, my words, or my money. They are resources of the community. I must represent that community competently, and I pledge to serve it with humility. I am also conscious of the fact that my choice to wear a yarmulke, which broadcasts to others my Jewish observance, may seem at first blush to set me apart, to identify me not as a New Yorker, but as a member of a smaller group within our great state. To the contrary, I believe that my choice to overtly identify as an observant Jew makes a different statement. It says that each of us is unique. We each have our own values and beliefs, but notwithstanding our differences, we are one community. If I am appointed, I will ask every question required to obtain the truth for any constituency I am privileged to represent. Most importantly, I will always act in a manner that is in the best interest of educating all of our children. Thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you and your predecessors and successors for devoting your lives to the type of leadership that made this day possible for me and for others. I hope that you give me the honor and privilege of doing my part as a New York State Regent.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a well-said statement, a well-thought-out statement. I do want to just respond to the last thing you said. We always have an amazing array of individuals come in, so we want everyone to feel welcome. As a matter of fact, one of the candidates was a Christian minister in Moldova. So we really get a wide variety of people. I hope I can find Moldova on the map. You know, I don't want to say anything about my social studies expertise, but we really want you to feel welcome today, and we're glad that you came. We've been asking some of the candidates, and really most of them, to talk a little bit about the emerging issue of student data privacy, and how do we protect our students in an internet age when everything just seems to be out there. And especially since you're on a school board, I'm sure you're aware of some of the issues regarding the In Bloom thing, that getting the data sent to state ed, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to speak to it, just a thought.
So last year we actually had an issue where during the opt-out time of the year, a group of educators within the school wanted to contact parents and students directly to encourage them to opt out. So as a result, we had a fairly extensive meeting with our attorneys about FERPA and the issues that require protection. So we take very seriously the issue of protection of all data that is warehoused within both in our computers and the paper data, and we don't reveal it to anybody. We do share it according to the FERPA regulations with schools that the children apply to, and the parents, before the child is 18, if they come in and they allow us to share the data, we'll share the data, but otherwise we won't. We are very protective of the issues that surround privacy for our children. We have a very large special needs population within our school, and the special needs population, at times, when I first got on the board, people were very, very loose with mentioning names, discussing needs, and we have started to refer to people only by number. We are very, very careful not to avoid that. We've also had issues in terms of the Fourth Amendment on the non-data part, in terms of checking lockers and the rest. So,
No, I appreciate your answer. I too have to be more aware myself. One of the candidates actually lives near my home, and I started to say it, and then I realized now that we're live streaming, poor man really probably doesn't want his address out to the multitudes forever, because once it's on the internet, it's there forever. So thankfully I caught myself. But it is an emerging field for all of us, how we can maintain all of our privacy as much as we can. The only other question I have, I know there's some others, is the issue of career and technical education. I know on Long Island, obviously, the BOCES provide that services. If you were appointed to be a region and you'd be a region at large, it does require a lot of travel and a lot of work in areas that you may not have worked in as a school board member. Do you have any thoughts on the growing discussion on multiple pathways and CTE issues, career and technical issues?
I find myself in an interesting position. When I first decided to run for the school board, one of the questions that I was asked was, why me, why now? I had been a founding member of a local non-public school, and my response then, I believe then, will now mirror my response now. As a result of my understanding of non-public schools and what the non-public schools have set up in the neighborhood, one of the schools in particular, a school in Far Rockaway, it's a school called Yeshiva Darchei Torah, they had a large contingent of children who were challenged to participate in class academically. So they built rooms in the building, and they brought in electricians and plumbers and craftsmen to help the children build a room and take apart a room every single year. We didn't have that in the public schools. So I brought our superintendent over to Darchei Torah, and now we've introduced a program that is very, very similar and expanded it to include auto mechanics so that we can assist those children who have a greater challenge academically. I had a patient once, I remember, an older woman, she was in her 90s. She told me she got her BA when she was 17, her master's when she was 30, and her PhD when she was 72. She defined that as being a slow learner. So we have children who are slow learners. And they're not necessarily slow learners because they are slow, but life circumstances have put them where they need other things. So I'm very, very fortunate. I'm able to look at two sides of a coin and be able to see both sides of the coin. And as a result of being able to see both sides of the coin, I can try to blend those two things together. I find this an interesting position because as a dentist, normally my patients don't talk back. So
We had a dentist
this is a whole
in the
new
legislature
approach
for
to me.
many years, our ranking member before Mr. Roberts, Dr. Miller, and I used to tease him about that all the time. I'd say, Joel, you're used to people not talking back to you. You gotta, he'd get mad at me, but we won't go there now. I will say, I personally have a partiality for dentists, but they usually are from NYU School of Dentistry, but we won't hold it against you that you were at Columbia. I'm done. Thank you so much. We have other questions. That's the rivalry, that's the
Oh, yeah,
rivalry.
very decidedly. And I represent part of Lower Manhattan, so, but have
My
always, as chair,
my father used to work on Delancey in Essex.
not that far down, but it is a neighborhood I like to go to regularly. But we have Mr. Lupinacci, who is the ranking member on higher ed, followed by Mr. Goldfeder.
I just had one of the prior candidates was a school board member also, and I served on a school board for 9 years. So it's an interesting perspective that you have in terms of, policy making at the local level. What things would you think that the Board of Regents should change or should work on based on your school board experience and the interaction you've had?
So I'm going to go back to the FERPA discussion, if you don't mind. And I'm going to go back to what I said in my prepared statement about monies being available. We have a legal challenge. Every time an issue comes up, we have to turn to our attorney. That attorney bills us for X number of hours, and we get a response. Some of the responses really are canned. And what I mean by that is that if I have a FERPA issue, I should be able to pick up the phone, call the legal department in the SED and say, this is my FERPA issue. What is the appropriate way to proceed, and not be forced to turn to a staff attorney and spend money in that way. And there are a variety of issues where I believe the SED tackles them for the 600 and something school districts across the state of New York on a daily basis. And it would be overwhelmingly helpful from a financial perspective if we could find a way to share in the wealth of knowledge that the SED has. The other issues, I was actually just speaking to somebody about it today. Often when we get letters from the SED, the comment that comes along with the letter from the SED is, oh, what now? We have to work in the SED to create a line of communication where people see information flowing from the SED as being positive and helpful to allow us to reach new heights for the children, as opposed to burdens. And I'm not talking about whether the mandate is funded or not funded. I'm talking about creating a communication line that is positive and helpful.
Mr. Goldfeder?
So this is a question that came up earlier, and I think it's appropriate now, especially since you don't have the experience in the classroom. Do you think not having the experience in the classroom has helped, or could, or sort of has put you at a disadvantage?
Well, I'm certainly not going to say it puts me at a disadvantage. I might as well just say goodbye and leave. But most individuals who apply to institutions of higher education who haven't had the good fortune of attending school, it's common practice to get credit for life experience. So I went to school from kindergarten through dental school. So although you might say that I'm not an educator, I've been educated by educators all through my life. I've been exposed to those who were good and those who were bad and those who were indifferent. But if we look at the 200-page report that came out of Governor Cuomo's office of failing schools, which talks about hundreds of thousands of failing schools, those hundreds of thousands of failing schools are run by educators. So As with every experience set, there are some really terrific educators, and then there are educators who are challenged. There are some really terrific school board members, and I hope that I'm one of them, and then there are some that are challenged. My contention is that I am a good school board member who has educated himself through life experience, and as a result, my experience set to the regents would be helpful and not hurtful. And my not being in the classroom is not the issue. It is a segment of something that's important, but it's not the primary issue. There are lots of things that are important, and it's just part of the puzzle. I bring a different part.
I think a lot of us believe we say the same thing about the legislature. Are there any issues from your school district, right? Big issues. I mean, it's a small school district, and the position as a regent, obviously, to represent at large, to represent the entire state. So are there any issues that you've dealt with in the school district that are a good example of?
So once again, the Lawrence School District is a microcosm of the state. We have a quickly growing Hispanic community. The number of our children who are economically disadvantaged from 1995 changed from 9% to 61%. That's astounding. And as a result, we've had to strategize almost on a weekly basis to create avenues to allow the children to succeed. I don't believe that that's any different anywhere in the state. Once again, if we turn to Governor Cuomo's 200-page report, you look at schools that have been failing historically for years, and I'm so puzzled by that. How does that just continue to go on without somebody developing an educational SWAT team and coming in and saying, this is how we fix it, or this is the experience set that I have to fix it, or there are schools in the state that have encountered the same problems, let's take their experience set and bring it here. Here I might say that as a dentist, what I do when a patient comes in is I look at their x-rays, I look at their clinical presentation, I review their history, and I triage. And that's what has to happen on the educational scene. We have to look, we have to listen, we have to evaluate. In our STEM program, for example, we try to bring children in to excite them and then to engage them. When you have failing schools, we have to find a way to excite the staff and then to engage the staff. And that's no different whether you do it in Lawrence or you do it in, I don't want to mention a name because in case it's not a failing district, another lovely place in New York State.
Very much. Mr. Graff, close.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. And you?
So far, so good.
Okay.
The Common Core state standards, you're saying your school implemented them, okay? Now, did you write your own curriculum, or did you adopt the state's curriculum?
We adopted the state's curriculum with modification.
Otherwise, you fixed all the errors and everything else in it?
I'm really not comfortable saying whether we fixed all the errors or not because I don't, I'm not involved in evaluating the curriculum at that point. I can tell you that our deputy superintendent for curriculum was up in Albany often, and we just had a discussion about it. And the Common Core introduction in our school has elevated all our scores in a very, very significant way.
That's true.
Okay. Well, it's a very structured, one of the things you said was very interesting. And the Common Core, it's a very structured curriculum. I mean, it's almost like the teachers, their instructions are scripted because they have to do certain things. And one of the things you brought up was putting together a room and taking the room apart in high school, construction and stuff.
Right.
And I know my school had a thing where they actually built a modular house. They had students build a modular home,
Wow.
okay? And they learned that.
We weren't that involved. We built a bathroom and we
Right.
took it down.
Right. But they actually built a modular home and would auction off the modular home to help fund the project. But because of the strictness of the curriculum, that went by the wayside.
I want the peanut butter.
You know, and I've talked to many people. I even talked to the governor,
Yeah.
believe it or not, at one point. And one of the things I said is when I was a kid and we went to school, okay, we had a choice between a Regents diploma and a general diploma, a career track and an education track. We had wood shops, we had automotive shops. You know, they can get their beautician license, they can get their LPN license, and everything else coming out of high school. All right? And the way we're pushing education, all of that stuff is just going to the wayside. I mean, I meet people out there that don't know which end of a screwdriver to use. All right? What are your thoughts about where we're pushing education? And I mean, I thought that the model that we were doing education when I was younger was a great model, you know, because not all kids are going to college, right? And there's nothing wrong with being a plumber or an electrician. A lot of them make more than new lawyers coming out of law school.
The only class in elementary school that I got an A in was shop. And I graduated high school with a solid B. Not an A, not a C, a nice solid B. I was a regular middle-of-the-road guy. I started college, and I continued college exactly as I had ended high school, a solid B. Then I met my wife, who explained to me that the way you do better in school is by studying, which was a completely new perspective for me. And I started to do well in school. I think that all the kids in school mature at a rate that is not the same. And as a result, there are children who need to be engaged in school on the vocational side so that their interests catch up to their maturity when they decide that they want to do more for themselves, if they decide they want to do more for themselves. The statement I made about my patient being a slow learner, there's a Hebrew phrase. It's called Chanoch lenar al pi darko. Teach a child according to his path. We have IEPs for special needs students. I'm too confused. Why don't we have IEPs for regular needs students? Why don't we look at each child and say, what does this child need to succeed? And then design it for the child. So if it's as you say, which is shop, then that's what the child needs. If it's participating in an Intel science fair, that's what the child needs, but we don't do it. And my personal perspective is that that's a mistake. You know, someone once told me a line, I love coffee, but sometimes you have to have tea. It's the same thing here. I would love to have everybody go through school exactly as someone who put together a curriculum feels that they should go through school. I would love it. It's not real. So what we need to do is we need to look at students and say, what does this student need? And we should expand the concept of the IEP to be how do we help each individual student? It's intensive. It's more challenging, but it's the right thing to do.
Glad you brought up IEPs because what's happening now is under the testing scheme that they have from the federal government, even though we put in for waivers, they're ignoring their IEPs. Okay, so some students with disabilities, we do what's called guided learning. Okay, it's not cheating, it's, you guide the student. Then when they have to take the test, the teacher's not allowed to do it. Okay, they're not allowed to guide them at all. And the kids are confused and everything else. And that's not the way they learn, right? And the other thing that they'll do is they'll take a kid that is chronologically in 5th grade under the Common Core, right, but developmentally in 2nd grade, and they'll test him on a 5th grade level, okay, which is asinine in my opinion, all right?
I think there are things that are wrong. We have to find a way to have people admit it.
But now what they want to do is they want to use that test score and 50% of the test score, right, to grade teacher performance. If the test is that bad and you're not using.
I have a problem with that. If you don't mind, I'm going to go to dentistry again. Okay? I have a patient come into the office, and I sit down and I say, you need to floss your teeth. You need to use a water pick. You need to use a toothpaste with additional fluoride. And he listens and he shakes his head. He comes back 6 months later, and there are 6 cavities. He didn't floss. He didn't use a toothpaste. He didn't brush. So using the Common Core standard, I'm going to be evaluated by the patient's performance. And they're going to say, what a lousy dentist. But I didn't not brush. I did not floss. It's the same thing for a teacher. If you're going to judge a teacher by the performance of another, you need to have a better criteria for judging. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. There are criteria that we can develop. That's not the criteria that I would use.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing, oh, of course, Mr. Avenatti. You were so, no, you must, because we're live streaming, so.
With the live stream, you have to have the
Want
mic.
mine?
You have to come and,
See, that's the technology's wonderful, but it has its,
and we appreciate that, and of course, we'll accommodate you after you were so complimentary.
Thank you for your engaging presentation. You were a B student, that's why you became a dentist rather than a lawyer, I guess that's Okay. He's got a sense of humor. I'm waiting for his response.
There was a fellow in my neighborhood who once saw me and my father and my brother and says, which one are you? You're the dentist? I said, yeah. He says, oh, you couldn't make it into medical school? So
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
That's okay. Tell me a little bit about special ed in your district and what you think we should be doing to make special education better in the state of New York.
I can just tell you what we've been doing in our district to make special education better. We had many, it's a real challenge to take a regular education school and put on them the responsibility of doing special education appropriately. So what happened when when I was on the board, many of our children left to BOCES programs, and we lost track of them completely. So what we've done in the last 3 years is our superintendent and our deputy superintendent has visited every school that our special ed children are attending. And we've made the determination that there are many programs where we can bring the children back to our home, keep our eye on them, use our teachers, use our therapists, and as a result, create a better product. And we've done that. As a matter of fact, our special ed graduation rate has just in the last year, from 2014 to this year, jumped 6%, from 44% to 51% in terms of graduation. What we need to do is we need to be understanding of the fact that special ed requires its own focus and not part of a regular education focus. And by focusing on special ed directly and not simply farming out children and being held accountable to bring children to the level that they could reach within our student body, that would be effective.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Assemblymember Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who has, like some of our other colleagues, chosen to watch from the bleachers. But we're happy to have her here. We want to thank you very much for your presentation, your responsiveness to many, many questions, and your good humor.
Can I just finish with one thing? And if you don't mind, it's a joke, but it's not a joke, but it's true. My mother was an incredible woman. And I won't go into all of it. But my mother had a very, very simple saying, and this is how she survived. My mother would never, ever say, "Oi, how am I going to do that?" My mother always used to say, "Oh, how am I going to do that?" And the difference in intonation was her approach to life that she embedded in me. My attitude is that there are problems that need to be overcome, and they have to be overcome, and they will be overcome. We just have to make ourselves determined enough to make it happen. Thank you
I
very
was
much.
very fortunate to have a mother who told me, take every knock as a boost.
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you very much. I think, is he in the 5